anyone singing for us today? Ikaw na lang, sir. Can I request? Acapella. The 58th session of the Senate and the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. We will be led in prayer today by our distinguished colleague, Senator Grace Poe.
Sa ngalan ng Ama, ng Anak, ng Espiritu Santo. Amen. Panginoon, gabayan po ninyo kami, linawin ninyo ang aming pag-iisip, naway manaig ang pagkakaisa namin tungo sa mga bagay na ikabubuti ng aming bayan. Ipakita ninyo sa amin ang katotohanan at ilantad ang mga ikinukubli sa amin. Naway huwag namin malilimutan na ang aming katungkulan ay isang pribilehiyo at ang punot dulo ay paninilbihan. Amen. Sa ngalan ng Ama, ng Anak, ng Espiritu Santo. Amen.
Please remain standing for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, peras ng sinanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupi, di ka pasisingil. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong magaw, ay hilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kisap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na naglilingin, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhati pasinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Session suspended for 1 minute. Members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 19 senators present, the chair declares the president of the quorum.
Mr.
Majority
President,
Leader.
thank you, Mr. President. Before we proceed, may we just acknowledge some guests from the gallery, guests of the Senate and this representation team from the Bangsamoro Parliament, led by Attorney Merab Bari, Chief of Staff of Majority Leader Dumama Alba. They are all here today, Mr. President, and they had an enriching benchmarking session with various Senate offices this morning. We also would like to...
Assalamualaikum to my brothers in Mindanao.
We also like to recognize guests of Senators Tolentino, Legarda, Ejercito, and Gatchalian, LGU officials of Pagudpud, Ilocos Norte, led by Mayor Rafael Benembrito III, LGU officials of Pangil, Laguna, led by Mayor Gerald Aritao. Also guests of Senator De La Rosa, Vice Mayor Alonzo Saclag Jr. of Lubuagan, Kalinga. He is the Regional President of the Vice Mayors League of Cordillera. Also guests of the Senate, political science students and faculty from the University of Angas, and also guests of the Senate, officials of OPAPRU, led by Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. We also would like to put on record, Mr. President, that the gentleman from Tagaytay City, from the province of Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino, who is also seeking the floor. Maybe just acknowledge, Mr. President, recognize the gentleman from Cavite, Senator
Before
Francis
we
Tolentino.
recognize Senator Francis Tolentino, we'd like to welcome all the guests to the Senate. Welcome to your Senate, the Philippine Senate. Yes, Senator Francis Tolentino is recognized.
Mr. President, magandang hapon po. A few days ago, Mr. President, while I was not physically present, this representation was informed of a manifestation made by one of our colleagues here concerning a supposed to be prejudicial question, quote unquote, relative to these chambers lacking the required or appropriate procedure to amend or revise the 1987 Constitution, Mr. President. Mr. President, just as a manifestation, this representation already filed resolution number 941, a resolution adopting rules to amend and or revise the 1987 Constitution, Mr. President. And the submission of this representation, Mr. President, is that this should be tackled or addressed immediately by the Committee on Rules, since it would supplant or supplement the gaps existing right now in the Senate Rules of Procedure, Mr. President. Just a manifestation, Mr. President.
Yes, the Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We take note of the manifestation of the distinguished gentleman from Cavite, Senator Francis Tolentino. This was also, again, the subject of Senator Escudero's manifestation last February 28, Mr. President. I have here with me a copy of the gentleman's resolution, PS resolution number 941. In view of this, Mr. President, we'd like to state into the records that immediately after the agreement between this representation and members of this institution, including our Senate Minority Leader, we immediately released, Mr. President, the notice of meeting of the Committee on Rules last February 29, and it is scheduled this Wednesday, Mr. President, March 6. And we also take note of the resolution of the gentleman from Cavite, PSR resolution number 941, today, which was filed today, Mr. President, and which will be referred to the Committee on Rules. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, the Majority Leader. Does that satisfy our distinguished colleague from Cavite?
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journals of the 56th session Tuesday, February 27, 2024, and 57th session Wednesday, February 28, 2024, and consider the same as approved.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There being no objection, we ask Secretary to proceed with the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate Number 2574, an act converting the Metro Naga Development Council into the Metro Naga Development Authority, defining its powers and functions, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senators Tolentino, De La Rosa, and Ejercito.
To the Committees on Local Government, Government Corporations, and Finance.
2576, an act standardizing the retirement benefits of justice judges and judiciary officials with judicial rank, salary, and privileges, and appropriating funds therefore, amending for the purpose RA 910 as amended by Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Justice, and Finance.
2577, declaring the Verde Island Passage located in the province of Batangas, Marinduque, Occidental Mindoro, Oriental Mindoro, and Romblon, an ecotourism zone, Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committees on Tourism, Environment, and Finance.
2578, protecting the rights of all workers, organizations, and unions from interference by their employers, public authorities, or their agents, and providing penalties for violations thereof, Senator Revilla Jr.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resource Development.
2579, an act providing for the registration, regulation, and operation of cooperative banks, Senator Villar M.
To the Committee on Banks, Cooperatives, and Ways and Means.
Resolution, proposed Senate Resolution 939, directing the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry to assess the viability of imposing a mandatory comprehensive insurance coverage requirement for government vehicles by Senator Tulfo.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee Report 211, jointly by the Committees on Basic Education, Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Finance, on Senate Number 2575 with Senators Angara, Gatchalian, Villanueva, Revilla Jr., and Ontiveros as authors, an act ensuring the alignment of basic education and early childhood care and development, amending for the purpose RA 10410, otherwise known as the Early Years Act of 2013, appropriating funds therefore, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Numbers 1754 and 2029, sponsor Senator Gatchalian.
To the calendar for ordinary business. There's additional reference to business. Please proceed.
Additional reference of business, bills on first reading, Senate Number 2580, extending the corporate life of the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, amending for the purpose Section 50 of RA 9136, otherwise known as the Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001, by Senator Tulfo.
To the Committee on Government Corporations and Energy.
2581, declaring the 3rd of March of every year as a special day for the commemoration of Philippines-South Korea Friendship Day, Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Culture and Arts, Foreign Relations, and Finance.
Resolutions, proposed Senate Resolution 940, directing the appropriate Senate Committee to conduct an inquiry into the irregular disposition and sale of the National Food Authority repackaged rice stocks to certain rice traders at low prices, Senator Marcos.
To the Committees on Accountability of Public Officers, Investigation, Agriculture, Food, and Environment Reform.
941, resolution adopting rules to amend and/or revise the 1987 Constitution, Senator Tolentino.
To the Committee on Rules.
942, resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of highly acclaimed Filipino actress Jacqueline Jose on 2 March 2024, Senator Estrada.
To the Committee on Rules. Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2352. This is the bill on the Jail Integration Act. Printed copies of the measure were electronically distributed to the members on February 27, 2024, in compliance with the 3-day rule in the Constitution.
There be no objection. The motion is approved. We ask Secretary to read the title of the measure and proceed with the roll call vote.
An act transferring the control and supervision of the provincial and sub-provincial jails to the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
Yes. With 19 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstentions, Senate Bill number 2352 is approved on third reading.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We congratulate our dear colleague, Senator Bato de la Rosa, who is also seeking the floor, Mr. President. May I ask that he be recognized, Mr. President?
Yes, congratulations, our dear colleague. Senator Bato de la Rosa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. Mr. President, together with esteemed colleagues, Senate President Mig Subiri, Senator Bong Revilla Jr., Senator J.B. Ejercito, and Majority Leader Senator Joel Villanueva, I wish to take this opportunity to thank this august chamber. Today, Senate Bill number 2352, or the Jail Integration Act, is approved on third reading. While delegation is perhaps the truest form of trustworthiness, it should not reach a point that it becomes more of a burden rather than a noble duty. When I defended this bill on the floor, Mr. President, interpellated by our ever-sharp Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Hontiveros, that was one of the fruits of that exchange. Indeed, by turning over the management and supervision of our provincial and sub-provincial jail from the provincial government to the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, those jails stand to benefit not only from the expertise and world-class standards that the BJMP sets for itself, but more importantly, from the BJMP's national programs. Also, as I have mentioned before, the LGUs will benefit from this measure too. They will be liberated from functions that tend to divide their attention and limited resources, such as these endeavors that may very well be performed by a government agency that specializes in these matters, such as the BJMP. Correction and reformation take a great deal of time and expertise. As such, they should be delegated to agencies whose primary function has always been the rehabilitation of persons deprived of liberty, or PDLs. When there is a unified, integrated way of dealing with PDLs, then we can also set a unified and integrated vision for them. This somehow gives them the message: the entire government is looking after you. Our laws have always acknowledged and recognized local authority and their ability to address community concerns. However, it is our belief that special circumstances require special attention and dedication. We have always advocated for devolution and decentralization, but we also maintain our conviction that whenever necessary, whenever possible, we must take a more holistic approach to our government programs. To the BJMP headed by the competent leadership of Jail Director Roel S. Rivera, congratulations are in order. But more importantly, let this be concrete proof of how much your Senate trusts you. That popular saying shall always ring true: to whom much is given, much is also expected. Sa bawat provincial at sub-provincial jail na iti-turn over sa inyo, lagi niyong isa sa isip at isa sa puso kung ano ang ibig sabihin ito. May mga panibagong PDL na aasa sa kalinga ninyo. They may be deprived of liberty, but they should never be deprived of the basic human need to be properly looked after. Maraming salamat, Mr. President, at mga minamahal kong kasama, dahil kaisa ko kayo sa hangarin na ito. Thank you for supporting this vision.
Maraming salamat, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa. Congratulations to you and to of course, the BJMP family.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, this juncture, the following are House concurrent resolutions on amnesties that require the concurrence of this august chamber as provided for under the Constitution. Number 1 is House Concurrent Resolution number 19, granting amnesty to members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, Alex Bongcayaw Brigade, RPMP, RPA, ABB. Number 2, House Concurrent Resolution number 21, granting amnesty to members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF. And number 3, House Concurrent Resolution number 22, granting amnesty of members of the Moro National Liberation Front, or MNLF. Mr. President, at this juncture, and with the consent of the body, I move that we vote for adoption of House Concurrent Resolution number 19. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, House Concurrent Resolution number 19 is hereby, before we act, we'll ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure. The Majority
And the
Leader
vote.
read it already, so it's,
Yes.
but we'll ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Concurrent resolution concurring with proclamation number 403 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Mga Gawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, Alex Bongcayaw Brigade, who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs.
Please proceed with the roll call vote.
Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Antiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva,
Yes.
Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
Yes. With 19 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstentions, House Concurrent Resolution number 19 is approved and adopted by the Senate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At this juncture and with the consent of the body, I move that we vote for adoption of House Concurrent Resolution number 21. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, we ask Secretary to read the title of the measure and proceed with the roll call vote.
Concurrent resolution concurring with proclamation number 405 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva,
Yes.
Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 19 affirmative votes, 0 negative votes, 0 abstentions, House Concurrent Resolution number 21 is hereby adopted by the Senate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This juncture and with the consent of the body, I move that we vote for adoption of House Concurrent Resolution number 22. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, we ask Secretary to proceed with reading the title of the measure and the roll call vote.
Concurrent resolution concurring with proclamation number 406 of the President of the Republic of the Philippines dated November 22, 2023, entitled Granting Amnesty to Members of the Moro National Liberation Front who have committed crimes punishable under the revised penal code and special penal laws in furtherance of their political beliefs. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva,
Yes.
Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 19 affirmative votes, 0 abstentions, 0 negative votes, House Concurrent Resolution number 22 is hereby adopted.
Thank you very much,
Congratulations.
Mr. President. We congratulate our distinguished sponsor, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, who is also seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
Senator Estrada is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to place on record my sincerest gratitude to my honorable colleagues for supporting the adoption of House Concurrent Resolutions 19, 21, and 22, concurring with Presidential Proclamation numbers 403, 405, and 406, which grants amnesty to the members of the Revolutionaryong Partido ng Manggagawa ng Pilipinas, Revolutionary Proletarian Army, Alex Bongcayaw Brigade, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Moro National Liberation Front, respectively. The congressional concurrence to the aforementioned presidential proclamation signifies the Filipino people's support to the comprehensive peace efforts and genuine commitment of the government to attaining lasting peace. As your chairman of the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation, as of now, I am truly honored and privileged to sponsor these measures that will foster healing and social cohesion and will provide the window to end internal armed conflicts and rebellion which have already cost the country a staggering amount of lost economic opportunities and the lives of countless Filipinos. We thank the esteemed members of this august chamber, under the leadership of Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri, as well as our minority floor leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, who happens to be both proud and renowned sons of the great Mindanao region, for prioritizing our committee reports and allowing this representation to defend these important measures amid the very hectic legislative agenda. Warmest thanks to the officials of the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, and Unity, or the OPA-PRU, led by Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the National Amnesty Commission, led by Chairperson Attorney Lea Tanodra Armamento, and Commissioners Jamar Kulayan and Nasser Maruham Salik, as well as the officials from the Justice and National Defense Departments for their kind assistance and patience. Lastly, we wish to place on record, upon the request of our good minority leader during the period of interpellation, that we have already talked to the OPAPRO family, and the committee will soon facilitate a briefing about the status of our peace agreements. Please expect an invitation from them soon. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, this juncture, the distinguished gentleman from Nueva Ecija and Camarines Norte, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, is seeking the floor. May I move that he be recognized for his short manifestation, Mr. President?
Senator Padilla is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo at Pinunong Mayorya. Ginoong Pangulo, meron pong malungkot na pangyayari. Isa pong pagluluksa ang nangyayari po sa mundo ng pelikulang Pilipino at telebisyon patungkol po sa biglaang pagpanaw ng atin pong ginagalang at hinahangaan na artistang Pilipino na nagngangalang Jacqueline Jose. Siya po ay kilala, siya po ay masasabi nating award-winning. Siya po ay nagkaroon ng Best Actress Award sa Cannes Film Festival na kinikilala po sa buong daigdig at nagbigay po sa atin ng karangalan sa bansang Pilipinas. At siya din po ay naging parang propesora, teacher sa mga batang artista, inspirasyon sa mga batang artista, katulad po nila Coco Martin, katulad din po sa aking anak na si Kylie Padilla. Hinihingi ko po sa aking mga kasama dito sa Senado na maging kasama po kayo sa pakikiramay sa kanyang pamilya sa biglaang pagyao po ng ating hinahangaan at minamahal na si Jacqueline Jose. Kasama ko po dito sa manifestasyon na ito ay sila Senator Bong Revilla Jr., Senator Jingo Estrada, Senator Grace po, at sa lahat po ng mga senador na meron pong puwang sa puso ang mundo ng pelikulang Pilipino at telebisyon. Muli po, hinihingi ko po sa inyo ang pakikiramay po natin kay Mary Jane Santa Ana Gok, also known as Jacqueline Jose. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat, Senator Padilla. Gusto din po natin na sabihin na the Senate extends its deepest condolences, sincerest condolences to the family of our actress, the famous actress, award-winning actress Jacqueline Jose, And maybe in the proper time, we can pass a resolution honoring her as soon as possible, maybe today, and invite the family so that we can turn over the
May I ask for a minute
Yes, if-
suspension, Mr. President? Just for a minute suspension.
session suspended.
Yes, Mr. President, we'd like to state into the records, Mr. President, that there's an overwhelming support coming from the members of the Senate to extend our deepest gratitude, thanks, and condolences to the family of the late Miss Jacqueline Jose, Mr. President. And at the proper time, we will tackle, Mr. President, and pass a resolution of commendation celebrating the life of the award-winning actress, Miss Jacqueline Jose, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Mr. President, Senator Tolentino is also seeking the floor. May I move that he be recognized, Mr. President?
Senator Tolentino, our
President.
distinguished colleague from the province of Cavite, is recognized.
Just an anterior manifestation, Mr. President. I should have rose when Senate Bill 2352 was approved on third reading. Just a manifestation, Mr. President, and with the concurrence of the principal author, Senator De La Rosa, may this representation be made the co-author of Senate Bill, the just approved Senate Bill 2352 relative to the transfer of the control and supervision of provincial jails to the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, Mr. President.
We take note of the manifestation.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, may I ask for one Senate minute break, Mr. President?
Yes, session is suspended for 1 Senate minute.
Thank you. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2572 under Committee Report number 209. This is the bill on the Bulacan Airport City Special Economic Zone and Freeport Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the bill and with the consent of the body, I move to open the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the distinguished sponsor, the distinguished lady from Pangasinan, Iloilo, and San Juan, Senator Grace Poe, and to interpellate our minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Our distinguished colleague from the provinces of Pangasinan, Iloilo, and San Juan City is recognized, Senator Grace Poe, and our distinguished colleague from the city of Cagayan de Oro and Zambales on the mother's side, Senator Coco Pimentel is recognized. And Marikina.
Yes, Mr. President, I was about to add that.
Marikina, yes, sir.
So with the permission of our sponsor, Mr. President, if I can commence with my interpellation on this measure.
It is my pleasure, Mr. President, although I would like to ask for a little bit of a consideration. My thoughts are probably not as sharp because we had such a delicious meal prepared by the better half of our minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Anyway, Mr. President, I think this is a measure which has been tackled here before, Mr. President, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Mr. President, this bill was passed by both houses. As the minority leader knows, unfortunately, it's been vetoed by the president.
So if this was previously vetoed by the president, did we pay attention to the reasons advanced by the president in vetoing this measure?
Absolutely, Mr. President. And in fact, we endeavored to make it more transparent, more inclusive, and for us, we addressed specifically also all the veto provisions.
How many observations or objections did the Office of the President raise when the President vetoed this particular measure, Mr. President? When was this passed? In what Congress, Mr. President? The previous one?
This was passed in the previous Congress, Mr. President, but because we had the elections in 2022, before it lapsed into law, it was vetoed by this current administration. And we're talking about, I think, 11? Ilang veto items? I'm counting here. They may be a subject to just one point, but there are several subjects. So I'm counting around 11 subjects.
11 also. So we can we can say that the president raised more or less 11 points against the original measure, Mr. President, passed in the 18th Congress. Tama po ba yan? If I'm not mistaken.
18th
no?
Congress.
No?
Just a clarification, it's 8 items.
8 points, okay.
8 items, but then there's some sub-subjects to some of the items.
Opo. There is a related law. There is a law related to this Ecozone. We passed a law governing the airport itself, the Bulacan airport itself, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, actually, the airport is a separate law. It's a franchise, the first ever franchise for an airport that was granted to the Bulacan airport. This one is an Ecozone, as the minority leader understands, within that airport zone. Now, it needs a separate law to establish an economic zone. And so this is what this measure is really all about.
Is the economic zone within the airport zone, or is the airport within the economic zone?
The airport is within the economic zone.
So if we pass this law, can we say that give it over that land area the geographic location of the airport, there will be two laws applying?
Yes, because I think there are two laws, but there are two different mandates in the law. The first one is just governing the businesses that will relocate to the ecozones. But of course, within the airport, there are laws governing also, let's just say, the sharing of the government in the revenue, what are the responsibilities of the airport operator, etc., which is obviously separate from the other provisions for the clients that will relocate to the ecozones.
There will be no conflict between the two laws, Mr. President?
Mr. President, I don't see it because the airport authority is a totally separate entity. There are laws governing how an airport is run, and we also strengthen that by reaffirming it in the Bulacan Airport franchise. With this one, what we are doing basically, we have covered the areas that will be included. Also, the board that will comprise the economic zone, the sharing, the compliance now. This is one of the ways we address the veto. The compliance with the Agrarian Reform Program, the compliance with the CREATE law, etc.
Sa veto, yung 8 points ng veto, saan? So how many economic zones, Mr. President, have been created through law? Because as I understand it, some economic zones are created through PEZA authority, Mr. President.
Mr. President, let me count here how many we have so far. Without the Baksesfa, we have
Ito yung point, veto message. Yeah. Okay. Paano sinagot? Ito ba?
Yes.
Ito na po. It's announced.
Opo, ito na po siya yung sinagot. Wala kang counting kasi.
Ano nga sinagot nito? Ano siya dito?
So far, there are around 9 economic zones all over the country, Mr. President.
Sige, masahin mo.
9 created by law.
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay. So,
We have, well, as you know, SBMA, Clark, AFAB, which is Bataan, Aurora, which is Apeco, Cagayan, CEZA, PEZA.
Hindi po ba may pinasa rin tayong batas to rationalize the incentives being given by the so-called economic zones na I think we refer to them as investment promotions agencies, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President, that's why we specifically mentioned that this will be compliant with CEZA, with the CEZA, I'm sorry, with the CREATE law.
So we are not in any way touching or amending impliedly any provision of the CREATE law, Mr. President. Papasok po itong ating Bulacan Airport City Special Economic Zone and Freeport under the terms of the CREATE law.
Yes, Mr. President, because that was one item of the veto that needed to be addressed. So in the past, there was no mention of a compliance with CREATE, but this time we specifically included it because it's in CREATE, one of the major subjects of that bill was really rationalizing the creation of new economic zones because they wanted, what do you call this, to widen the tax base. So with this one, this is an exception. That's why we also had to weigh the opportunities and the possible revenue that it will be worth it to give them some sort of an incentive and allow them certain privileges under an economic zone setup.
How large is the economic zone that we are declaring in this measure, Mr. President?
Mr. President, I think 55,000 hectares.
Parehas ba ito?
And it comprises several cities and districts in Bulacan.
Has it ever been done before, Mr. President, that entire municipalities are made part of an economic zone?
Yes, Mr. President. In fact, we have one just recently, Bataan, the AFAB, which we passed, I believe, last Congress, 17th Congress. And then we also have with CESA, Mr. President, which in fact CESA enjoys more privileges than this economic zone. And the Bataan Ecozone, if we compare it with the other ecozones that were already established, will be at par with the incentives given to those.
When an entire municipality or LGU, Mr. President, is declared a part of an economic zone, does this affect the power of the mayor to issue permits as well as of the Sanggunian to promulgate ordinances?
Mr. President, actually, it's not the entire province, but those that have been included in this, with regards to their powers that will be curtailed, they have actually a representation within the Bataan Economic Zone Board. So these LGUs will, not only will they maintain also some sort of influence or control, they will also receive a substantial amount in terms of revenue because there's a pie that will be divided. And compared to other economic zones, in this particular setup, the local government will actually get more in terms of the sharing of revenue.
Does being a part of an economic zone affect the powers of the Sanggunian of an LGU, Mr. President?
I'm sorry,
Because-
going back to the last one, actually, permits will still be issued by the local government unit. But once they relocate there, within that area, the revenue sharing for the other taxes that will be, the local government is supposed to get. Anyway, what was your question? Can you repeat your question again?
Does being a part of an economic zone affect the powers of the Sanggunian of an LGU, which is made part of an economic zone? Because as I understand the bill, hindi po ito na there are parts of a territory of an LGU which is part of the economic zone. We made an entire LGUs part of the economic zone, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I would like to clarify that we're not clipping the powers of the local government. It will only be after they secure the proper local government permits that are normally required, then they can register as a part of the economic zone.
Doesn't our bill make entire municipalities part of the economic zone? Therefore, the entire municipality is an economic zone?
Yes, Mr. President, but economic zone in terms of actually the revenue and also the incentives that they will be getting from being a part of the Ecozone. And so this will be more for the national government's revenue. Because once they're part of that economic zone, there are certain privileges, for example, a lower tax rate, which is actually not given by the local government, but the national government. That's why
By
this,
the authority, by the zone authority, yes.
right. That's why we are making this into a law, because of all the incentives that are given to them is of a national, the nature of the national government, not the local government.
So meaning to say, all the existing businesses or enterprises in an LGU declared as part of an economic zone may avail of the benefits of being an economic zone by applying before the authority. Ganun po ba yun?
Yes, Mr. President, but remember if they are, first of all, they need to be within the economic zone that we approve of. Okay, now, within the BACSESFA, which is comprised of several different members appointed by the President, there is a representation from the local government. Now, when they are approved by BACSESFA to relocate in that area, then yes, they will get those incentives from the national government.
Will this not affect the revenues or taxes due the LGU, Mr. President?
No, Mr. President, in fact, I think it will be better. Number one, infrastructure will greatly improve at no cost to the local government. Number two, in terms of property taxes, they will still be able to collect within their jurisdiction in the economic zone. Let's say, for example, Google or other companies, foreign companies or big companies, they plan to relocate because the infrastructure is already better. Normally, the local government wouldn't have that relocation because they're not ready to host such a huge industry. So now, not only will their income become bigger, it will become 10 times bigger than what they normally would have had they not had this big improvement in their area. It doesn't take much of a study to realize that locators, as well as the downstream effects of development like this, will be invaluable in terms of the income generated for the local government. Because aside from the normal permits and taxes, etc., they will actually have a share from BACSESFA on the total revenue of this economic zone, which is, if I'm not mistaken, how many percent again? The local government. 40% of the income of the economic zone will go to the local government, Mr. President. So madadagdagan, hindi sila mababawasan.
I'm looking at the issue from the point of view of the locator, Mr. President. Yung business permit, di ba, magbabayad po siya sa LGU based on past year's income figures po yan eh. So will the locator be paying two authorities, Mr. President? It will pay the LGU business permit as well as the authority fees, Mr. President, the Economic Zone Authority fees.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President, so I can get the data clear.
Session suspended.
So, Mr. President, can I clarify, going back, export enterprises shall pay RPT, local business tax, fees and charges, mayor's permit during their income tax holiday period. Once their ITH expires and they avail of the 5% SCIT rate on GIE, LGUs may no longer collect local business tax on income, including RPT. After SCIT period, the export enterprise will pay the regularly prescribed 25% corporate tax rate. Domestic enterprises shall pay RPT, local business tax, fees, charges, and mayor's permit during the ITH period and CIT with ED. After the CIT with ED period, the domestic enterprise will pay the regularly prescribed 25% corporate tax rate. So this is after, this is exactly in CREATE. So yung sunset clause, kung mag-a-apply na sa kanila. But right now, the benefit is they still pay, for the local government, they'll still receive all of those local business tax, etc. But in terms of other business tax on income, they will have some exemptions on the national government because they are a member of this Ecozone.
Did this measure get the endorsement of the municipalities which are deemed included in the economic zone?
Yes, actually, Mr. President, a lot of them are very enthusiastic about having the relocation of the economic zone in the area. They know it will spur economic growth. To be honest, what their concern is really not for the powers of the local government to be diluted. So that's why I mentioned all of these other permits are still for them to be able to grant. But the difference, of course, is when it comes to the income of the export zone, it is not just the area that determines it, it's also management, how it is run properly. That's why I think it's fair that local government, of course, doesn't get the entire pie, but they get 40%, which is still quite substantial.
Isn't it the fact that they get 40% because they are also investing in they're supposed to also contribute a certain sum, right? It's not by virtue of being covered by the economic zone. They are contributing to the capital of the economic zone authority.
Mr. President, they have an option to subscribe to the capital of Accesfa, but that's not automatic. And whether they subscribe or not, it's within their jurisdiction. They can still avail of the benefits of having the relocators there. Now, it's not clipping their powers. As I mentioned, permits are still granted by them. And in fact, Mr. President, para tayo nag-uumpisa sa wala. Parang binibilang natin, halimbawa na, hindi, pero kikita tayo ng ganito kung wala yung Ecozone. Pero ngayon, wala naman din dun eh. So, dagdag ito. And for them to be able to generate that much investment will be a huge burden and debt also for the local government to undertake. So that's why we always encourage also, whenever possible and feasible, a PPP. Because it's money not out of our pocket. But at the same time, para bang meron kang lupa, pinalis mo yung lupa mo na yan, magpapatayo ng building, meron ng infrastructure, hindi naman sa kanila yon, pero nagbabayad sila sa iyo ng renta tuloy-tuloy. Kaya sa naman ikaw yung nagpagawa, may utang ka sa bangko, oo nga, sa'yo lahat pupunta yung kita, pero napakalaki naman ng sakit ng ulo rin sa inyo at hindi ka rin sigurado kung makukuha mo yung mga tenants na binabalak mo dun para sa lugar na yon. Kaya mas malaking sugal para sa inyo.
Yung nabanggit pong 40% share ng mga municipalities declared as part of the economic zone, is that by virtue of their being a part of the economic zone or by virtue of their capital investment in the authority?
Kahit na wala silang capital investment, hindi sila subscribe, they can still get the 40% entitlement afforded to the local government just because that's their territory. But of course, if they have a capital investment, above and beyond that, para kang bumili ng stock. Halimbawa, Mr. President, ang San Miguel Corporation, nilease ang building mo. By virtue of them leasing it, you already get an income from that. So business permits, etc., to equate it with the national government. But if you want to make more and you believe that that undertaking of that Ecozone is a good thing, you invest. So if San Miguel makes money in stocks, you get your dividends. But that's above and beyond anything that is already entitled, that you're entitled to, which is the lease or the payment for that property.
That's in the measure, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
Maybe you know where in the measure that is, Mr. President.
Section 11, Mr. President, on revenue sharing. Section 11, line 23, to ensure sufficient funds, BACSESFA and the affected LGU shall be entitled to a share in the special corporate income tax or corporate income tax under the enhanced deduction regime from all registered business enterprises. For this matter, the said corporate income tax collected shall be divided as follows: 40% to the national government, which shall be directly remitted to the national government. 20% national government, provided that the revenue sharing under this section shall be considered compliance with Section 284 of the Local Government Code as amended and shall no longer be further divided for purposes of the national tax allotment. Dito yan, subsection C, 40% to the concerned local government, provided that the local government share from the revenues derived from BACSESFA registered locators who availed of incentives 11534 or the CREATE in component cities or municipalities shall be allocated among the LGUs of the Bulacan Ecozone using the formula under Section 285 of the Local Government Code of 1991 as amended. So we are compliant with all the existing laws that will that pertain to the concerns also of the revenues for the local government units.
And may we know, Mr. President, what LGUs in Bulacan would be part of the Bulacan Ecozone, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President. Hold on, let me go to the list. From Section B, we have Section 3B, Malolos and Meycauayan, and of the municipalities of Bulacan with a K, Paumbong, Giginto, Balagtas, Bocaue, Marilao, Obando, and Santa Maria in the province of Bulacan. And anything that is not yet included as a component part of the airport project and the airport city project. All other expansion areas of municipalities within the province of Bulacan and surrounding areas which may be declared as part of the Bulacan Ecozone, but with the President's approval, Mr. President. Pero ito yung mga nabanggit ko na areas na to, kasama na to, and naimbitahan po sila in several hearings. In fact, napasa na nga ito because the concern was not so much the local government at the time. It was more the compliance with certain revenue measures of the government.
Para dun po sa mga cities, dalawang cities, Malolos and Meycauayan, and then municipalities, Bulacan, Paumbong, Giginto, Balagtas, Bocaue, Marilao, Obando, Santa Maria. So, 8. 2 cities and 8 municipalities specifically mentioned in our measure as part of the Bulacan Ecozone. Were they consulted? Did they give consent? And if consent was given, in what form, Mr. President?
Mr. President, some of the local officials, actually the mayors of those provinces actually attended our hearings, while the others who may not have attended the most current hearing here in the Senate have attended in the past, and nobody has really sent a letter of objection or a position paper objecting to it. And most of them actually submitted a position paper already, which is on file.
Did they pass ordinances or resolutions of concurrence, Mr. President?
No, they didn't have to pass those ordinances because, Mr. President, that's why we are actually doing this as a law, because it's also within the powers of Congress, as well as the President later on, to declare an area a special economic zone. That is a power of Congress. And in fact, that's a power of Congress that is also delegated to the President.
May we know the basis, Mr. President? May I know the legal or constitutional basis of the statements of the sponsor?
Yes, Mr. President, just a moment suspension.
Yes, I mean, it's
I believe the status is Senator Grace Poe is defending the Senate Bill number 2572 and to interpolate the distinguished colleague Senator Coco Pimentel to continue his interpellation.
Ano nga? What?
Share. Yun yung, tignan mo section 11, yun yung kanyang gustong yan ay sundin. Ito, sa dulo, section 285.
Ready to resume, Mr. President?
Yeah, we're resumed. Please continue. Please proceed.
Going back to your question, going back to the question of our minority leader, what specific powers how are powers granted to Congress authorized for the President to be able to determine those territories? Mr. President, that is consistent with the Zambo Ecozone, SBMA, and Clark, which says that the creation, it is hereby created that the body, all other expansions whose territory shall be clearly defined through a presidential proclamation within the province of Bulacan and surrounding areas which may be declared as part of the Bulacan Ecozone in compliance with Section 7E of this Act. So in 7E, it is determined, but in the Zamboanga Ecozone, it is also stated that the specific metes and bounds of the Zambo Ecozone shall be more particularly defined in a presidential proclamation and shall be issued for this purpose. But designating ecozones in particular is what Congress does, like for those other ecozones, Mr. President.
So for the 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
For the 8.
8 municipalities and 2 cities. So for the 10 LGUs, which we are specifically enumerating and naming in the measure, we did not secure anymore an ordinance or resolution from the Sanggunians of the 10 LGUs expressing their consent to be made part of the Bulacan Ecozone. Just as a matter of fact, wala po.
Yes, Mr.
Opo,
President,
okay.
consistent also with the creation of other ecozones. It is actually the national government superseded local government approval because it is of national concern.
But nothing would have prevented us. Nothing prevents us from asking them for resolution of consent.
In fact, Mr. President, if you go through our hearings again, through their local representative, their mayors, they have expressed actually their support for this. Now, if there was an actual proceeding asking the rest of the members of the Sanggunian, we can ask for a copy of those, but it does not prevent us by law to designate their areas an ecozone because we actually did not take anything from their source of income. In fact, we will add to it.
And the reason why I'm asking this, Mr. President, is because of actually Section 3C. All other expansion areas or municipalities whose metes and bounds shall be clearly defined through a presidential proclamation within the province of Bulacan and surrounding areas, which may be declared as part of the Bulacan Ecozone in compliance with Section 7E of this Act. And if we look at Section 7E, it reads as follows. The areas comprising the Bulacan Ecozone may be expanded or reduced when necessary through a presidential proclamation with the concurrence through local legislation by the concerned LGU. So I thought that was the general rule, Mr. President, or the rule that we also observed when we named the 10 LGUs in the measure, Mr. President?
Mr. President, that only applies to the expansion
Huh?
of the
That's why
episodes,
when-
not for the actual creation.
So when we expand, we will now get the concurrence of the concerned LGU affected by the expansion through a local legislation. But when we established, we dispensed with the idea, Mr. President?
Well, Mr. President, I can't really unilaterally say that we've dispensed because they're part of our hearings, and in fact, they have not expressed their objection even during the past Congress when it was approved in both houses. And let's not forget that the lower house actually has local representatives. They are more representative of the particular districts that will be affected, and they are, if not supportive of it and voted to ratify it, they're one of the ones that actually sponsored it.
Yes, Mr. President, except that the principle that we found that we find in Section 7E is that the concurrence must be through a local legislation by the concerned LGU. So,
And I think,
at any rate, Mr. President, our sponsor made it of record that the mayors attended the hearings. Unfortunately, there is also there is a possibility that the mayor's sentiments may differ from the Sanggunian's sentiment also, Mr. President. Is that correct? I mean, as our Deputy Majority Leader who was once upon a time a mayor, Senator J.V. Ercito, is that correct? Is that possible? That the mayor's sentiment would be different from the Sanggunian's position on a certain issue? Yes, sir. So we make it of record that the Senator J.V. is nodding his head, Mr. President.
well, Mr. President, I would also like to say that because when you expand, it's more like the President will be able to declare the expansion. My understanding is it won't anymore go through this type of process of legislation because it's merely an expansion. That's why to have better authority on it and justification in the expansion part, which doesn't have to go through congressional hearings and approvals like this, they really need the local government approval or the Sanggunian. The LGU's concurrence was not required from LGUs in other ecozones, Mr. President. Besides, the local regional development mayor support council composed of mayors support this measure.
Sige po, but the RDC, of course, they come from different areas. So we cannot, that's not the council of the municipal council. At any rate, Mr. President, we were just pointing out the principle in 7E. So when we continue the interpellation, Mr. President, this representation would want to go one by one for each of the 8 objections presented by the President against the original bill. And then para pakita natin how we address the objections of the office of the President so that there will be no more expectation that this measure will again be vetoed by the President, because the President who vetoed the earlier measure is the same President, the incumbent, the current President, Mr. President. That's correct? That's a statement of fact.
I agree, and I thank our minority leader for making sure that we are very thorough in addressing those veto concerns, because that's really the key to be able to pass this, or at least have the confidence that we've already addressed those specific concerns.
So at this point, Mr. President, if I can suspend my interpellation, and then when we resume one by one the 8 matters raised by the President, we will tackle one by one, Mr. President.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
President.
you.
thank you very much to
Thank
the
you.
distinguished sponsor and to the distinguished minority floor leader.
Mag-meeting tayo mamaya ito.
Majority leader.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2572. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, motion is approved.
Minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2386. This bill pertains to the real property valuation and assessment that I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of this bill is that we are in the period of individual amendments. With the consent of the body, I move to resume the period of individual amendments using the clean copy of the bill as of February 27, 2024 as our working draft.
Yeah, there being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Win Gatchalian, for his individual amendments.
Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, our distinguished colleague, sponsor of the measure, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on page 6, line 17, before the words real property, insert the words the PVS end. And so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
On page 7, lines 2 to 3, delete the phrase including the development and maintenance of internationally accepted valuation standards, comma. And so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
On page 7, line 12, delete the word maintain and replace it with the word gather. And so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved. Maybe you can proceed to the other amendments.
Yes. On page 9, line 18, before the phrase in the practice, delete the word active and insert the word active before the word practice. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
On page 9, line 19, delete the word off and replace it with the word as a. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
On page 9, line 19, delete the word appraisal and replace it with the word appraiser. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendment approved.
On page 9, line 19, after the word years, insert the phrase prior to his or her appointment as a member of the consultative committee, comma. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 9, line 23, after the word assessors, comma, delete the word and. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 9, line 23, after the word sector, insert the phrase comma and the real estate sector. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
Mr. President, just to insert into the records, Mr. President, the inclusion of a representative from the private business sector to be a member of the consultative committee. Sorry. Mr. President, the inclusion of a representative from the real estate sector to be a member of the consultative committee is a proposed amendment from the good gentleman from Sorsogon, Senator Chis Escudero.
We
Just
put
a
that
minute.
on record, Your Honor.
On page 15, line 4.
So page 10, no amendment, 12, no amendment, page
Yes.
14, no amendment.
Yes, correct, Mr.
Yes,
President.
page
So we go to
15.
page 15. Page 15, line 4, after the word explanation, delete the word on and replace it with the word for. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
So we go to page 18, Mr. President. Page 18, line 1, delete the words or revisions. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 18, line 1, delete the word concern. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 18, line 2, delete the word and replace it with the words comma, which shall. So move, Mr.
There
President.
being no objection, amendments approved.
Page 18. 18. Oh, yeah. On page 18, line 12, after the phrase in accordance with, insert the words the PVS. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 18, line 14, after the words impact studies, comma, insert the words including the preparation of the revenue and tax impact report, comma. So move,
There
Mr.
being no
President.
objection, amendments approved.
On page 19, lines 3 to 4, delete the phrase in the case of government agencies and instrumentalities, comma. So move, Mr.
There
President.
being no objection, amendments approved.
On page 22, Mr. President, on page 22, line 12, after the word tax, insert the following proviso, colon, provided, comma, that the maximum assessment levels in Section 218 of RA number 7160, otherwise known as the Open Quote Local Government Code of 1991, close quote, shall be observed. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, amendments approved, subject to style.
And that is an amendment from Senator Chis Escudero as well. So on page 23, line 9, after the word being, insert the word paid. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, amendments approved.
On page 23, line 11, delete the second S in the word subjects. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, amendments approved.
No other amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Distinguished colleague.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2386. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, Senator Tiberos would like to avail of the privilege hour. I move that she be recognized.
Our distinguished colleague, Senator, the Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise on a point of personal and collective privilege. Mr. President, nung isang taon po, tayo bilang isang kongreso ay nagsulong at nagpasa ng isang batas na naglalayong magpalaya sa mga magsasaka mula sa tanikala ng mabigat na utang at buwis. I supported and continue to support Republic Act No. 11953 or the Agrarian Emancipation Law. Nung kanyang State of the Nation address, sabi ng Pangulo, quote, "Agrarian reform must continue," close quote. Kamakailan lang, nitong Pebrero 2024, sa Caraga Region, sabi ni Presidente, quote, "Layunin kong matapos ang pamamahagi ng lupang saklaw ng Agrarian Reform Program bago matapos ang aking termino," close quote. Ngunit sa mga nakalipas na linggo at buwan, ang aking opisina ay nakatanggap ng mga nakababahalang mga report mula sa people's organizations on the ground of what appears to be a pattern of agrarian reform reversals and land reconsolidation. Isang halimbawa itong kaso sa Pampanga, sa Barangay Anunas at Kuwayan. 1998 at 1999 pa lang, panahon ni na dating Presidente Ramos at Presidente Estrada, nung nabigay ang kanilang mga Certificate of Land Ownership Award o CLOA. Sa mahabang panahon, maagap na nagbabayad ang mga magsasaka hanggang sa na-fully paid po nila. At ang katibayan nito ay ang Certificate of Full Payment and Release of Estate Mortgage na issued po ng Land Bank of the Philippines. Kaso, lingid sa kanilang kaalaman, nagkasanglaan na pala ng lupa na bungakala nila ay sa kanila at binabayaran nila ng maayos at tiwala sa sistema. Ilang palit kamay na mga may-ari. May AMACO, may National Home Mortgage Finance Corporation, may Vive Eagle Land, may Cavacon, hanggang sa napunta sa Clark Hills Properties Corporation. Ngayon po ay may notice of demolition at ginagamitan ng dahas ang mga magbubukid para sila ay mapaalis sa kanilang lupa. I was very alarmed at the photos and videos I saw of the violence wrought against these farmers and residents of the area. May dala pang itak at sinaksak ang isa sa mga residente doon na senior citizen. Baril ang mga empleyado ng Clark Hills na pumupunta sa lugar at naninira ng bahay. Mula sa Pampanga, dako naman po tayo sa Nasugbu, Batangas, sa Hacienda, Palico, Banilad at Kailaway na pagmamay-ari ng Rojas and Company. Matagal na din po nabigay ang kanilang CLOA, halos kasabay ng pagpasa ng CARP noong 1988 At matagal na din po sa iba't ibang paraan, sinubukang hadlangan ang maayos na implementasyon ng reformang agraryo, kasama na ang pag-file ng application for conversion sa Hacienda Palico at Banilad. Nagpatuloy ang DAR sa pag-cover ng lupa, pero hindi po naging maayos ang pagsunod sa tamang procedure ng acquisition ang DAR. Samantalang ang mga magsasaka ay tuloy-tuloy na naninirahan sa lupang natanggap sa ilalim ng programa ng reformang panakahan. Because of the issues of mode of payment, the Supreme Court in 1999 ruled that the DAR issued CLOAs without just compensation to Rojas and Company and nullified the acquisition proceedings over the three haciendas. The case was remanded to DAR for proper acquisition proceedings. Natulog ang kaso ng ilang dekada. Sabi po ng RA 6657 as amended by RA 9700, pag umabot ng 10 years ang titulo ay indefeasible na at di na mababawi. Ngayon, biglang bumulaga sa mga Agrarian Reform Beneficiaries o ARBs ang balita na kailangan na nilang lisanin ang lupa at lumipat sa ibang lupa. This is based on the so-called win-win solution of Consolidated Order Number 6, which divides the land holdings 50-50, but apportions to the ARBs the less desirable areas of the land holding. According to the ARBs my office spoke with, the CLOA holders from all three haciendas may be relocated to a parcel of land on Barangay Palico without electricity or potable water at hindi man lang sila mismo ang nakonsulta sa kung paano ang magiging hatian ng lupa. What do these two cases have in common, Mr. President? Perhaps, if analyzed using the strict technicalities of the law, the actions of the duty bearers, and perhaps even some actions of the landowners are valid. Ngunit, sa mga legal na teknikalidad na ito, wala pong kinalaman ang magsasaka. Ano ba ang malay nila na pinagsasangla na ang lupa nila ng dating may-ari? Ano ang alam nila sa proseso ng DAR sa acquisition mula sa landowner? Basta alam nila, sila nagbabayad ng amilyar sa gobyerno. Ang sabi ng Supreme Court sa kaso sa Nasugbu, quote, "It goes against the basic precepts of justice, equity, and fairness to deprive these people through no fault of their own to the land they till." Close quote. Mr. President, hindi po sila ang nagkulang. Wala po silang sala, pero sila ang papasan. That the law is a great equalizer is a myth, Mr. President. When one party has more resources than the other, when one party has access to lawyers who can help navigate the system, that tilts the scales in their favor. Sabi nga ng isang ARB sa Pampanga, ninuno pa namin ang nagpupunla sa lupang iyan, pero wala kaming kalaban-laban kasi hindi kami mayaman. There is a pattern, Mr. President, at hindi lang po ito sa nakaupong DAR ngayon. This appears to be a systematic pattern that beleaguers our agrarian reform program. In Mauban, for example, 62 farmers are about to lose their lands due to CLOA cancellation, due to a fictitious exemption order. Bakit ko po nasabing fictitious? The affected farmers obtained a copy of a certification from the DAR that states that the said application for exemption has no file on record. In Maliwalo, Tarlac, 11 farming families who got 14 hectares of what was supposed to be a 60-hectare PD 27 covered area were surprised to find their CLOAs canceled. This was after 36 hectares were already sold by the previous landowner, and after the retention of 10 hectares was granted to the landowner. The reason for the cancellation was the grant of yet another retention covering the land subjected to agrarian reform. In Sariaya, hundreds of farmers and farm workers will be displaced after the CLOAs of 87 agrarian reform beneficiaries were canceled. The lands were exempted from the agrarian reform program due to the reclassification of the land into non-agricultural use before the CARP was enacted, according to the Supreme Court. Kaya, daing ng magsasaka, sana masilip ulit ang kasong ito ng Presidential Agrarian Reform Council. There are so many more ways that CARP is being sought to be evaded, Mr. President. Noong nakaraang linggo lang, dumalaw ako sa mga magsasaka ng ECJ Holding sa Negros Occidental. Agrarian Reform beneficiaries sila, pero pinilit pumirma ng kasunduan o joint venture agreement sa ECJ Corporation para sa gamit ng lupa. Ang siste, kahit sila ang may-ari ng lupa at nagtatrabaho nito, 70% ang napupunta sa korporasyon at 30% ang sa kanila. 800 pesos kada buwan, mas o menos, ang natitake home nila. Kulang na kulang para sa kanilang pamilya. Matagal na panahon na po akong kumikilos at naninindigan para sa ating kanayunan. Mula sa mga magsasaka at mangingisda ng Punta, Halahala, Rizal, kung saan ako unang nag-community organizing, mga magbubukid ng Sumilaw na matagumpay na naglakad mula Bukidnon hanggang Maynila, mga magnunyog ng Bondok Peninsula, Quezon, na patong-patong ang kasong kriminal ng mga landowner para lang sagkaan ang agrarian reform, hanggang sa mga magtutubo ng Negros na nakaranas ng matinding karahasan habang ginigiit nila ang kanilang karapatan. Malinaw sa akin na ang laban para sa lupa ay hindi madaling laban. Batid ko at batid ng marami ang iba't ibang paraan para sila ay gantsuhin at apihin. Kadalasan din, di natin ito nakikita o napapansin, lalo na tayong nasa Manila dahil malayo sa atin, malayo sa bituka, ika nga. Mr. President, hindi naman natin sinisisi ang nakaupong DAR ngayon because this is a systemic problem that crosses administrations. Ilang taon, ilang dekada ng kapabayaan. What is clear is that we owe an historical debt to our farmers. May utang tayo sa magbubukid. May utang tayo sa kanayunan. Sabi ni Presidente, he will seek permanent solutions to the issues that hound agrarian reform and its implementation. Let us start by addressing these patterns of injustice. Salamat kaayo, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Risa, our distinguished minority floor, our deputy minority floor leader.
Mr. President, I move that we refer the privileged speech of Senator Tiberos and all the to the Committee on Agriculture, Food, and Agrarian Reform. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. The motion is approved.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we proceed to the Senate President's designation of Senate conferees, the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2492 and House Bill number 7819, both pertaining to the Philippine Maritime Zones Act.
On the following members are hereby designated by the Senate as Senate conferees to the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2492 and House Bill number 7819. they are the following: Senator Francis Tolentino's chairperson, the party majority, Senator Ronald De La Rosa, Senator Ramon Revilla Jr., Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, and for the minority, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, March 5, 2024. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, March 5, 2024. Have a good evening, everyone.